All right, so it's the end of the workday, so time for another JNCIE-SP video. Last video, I attempted to verify the configurations I added for BFD for BGP, but unfortunately, I had earlier unplugged my hardware just by accident, and I thought all I needed to do was plug it back in and I'd be good, but I did need to go in and manually restart that VM. Another thing that kind of happened that's a little bit perhaps not ideal is I used to have another virtual machine set up for the VPN that I would use to connect to my lab remotely, like at a coffee shop or just even using a different computer that had GNS on it, just really so I could do it on the go. But obviously that's probably the best possible thing that could have gone horribly wrong right now, given the circumstances of it being April 8th, 2020, around this time period. So kind of glad that's the only thing that went wrong is my ability to use this at a coffee shop is now completely gone. So let's move into the verification commands. Oh, and already we got issues. So don't got any BGP neighbors coming up, which kind of makes sense. I was pretty skeptical about the logical systems configuration and using a tunnel like that. So I don't know if I can get that to work or if I just want to use the default for the sake of kind of having things be easier. I guess I'll just start off with a Google search. That's always an okay way to start. So Juniper Logical Systems, LT, we'll just start with that. So setting up logical systems, here we go. And configuring logical tunnel interfaces. So here's a related documentation. That's another really nice thing about the Juniper documentation. There's usually some very useful related documentation at the end. But I don't see how it can be tied in with a physical port, which is pretty clearly what's going to need to happen. Is it's going to need to send traffic out. So that's your terse pipe match. Oops, pipe match G dash. It's going to need to send traffic out G001, and I'm not sure how it can do that. With it just being in a logical system, and it's just configured on. So let's see here. Whoops, I actually don't want the no more. I want it to be in a more prompt so that it's more easy to see. So yeah, it's just configured on this logical tunnel interface, but I don't know how to get it to tunnel over the physical port. Okay, so here we go. So looks like the documentation is going to tell me how to do that. Yeah, because you can set up a logical system. They enable you to create an interface and configure IP addresses. It shows you how to add users to a user logical system. Okay, so using to configure logical system admins. Don't think, here we go. Creating an interface on a logical system. So requirements for the interface on the logical system to have connectivity. The corresponding physical interface, perfect, it's exactly what I wanted to read about, must be administratively up, and the physical link must be up. So that is already done. Off to a good start. Okay. In logical systems, you must treat each interface like a point-to-point connection because you can only connect one logical tunnel interface to another at any given time. Also, you must select an interface encapsulation type, specify a DLCI number or VLAN identifier, configure a corresponding protocol family, and set the logical interface unit number of the peering LT interface. And I believe we did a lot of that already. Let's take a look. So we definitely set the peer units. So you must set the logical unit of the peering LT interface. So we definitely did that. It's going to be logical unit 2. Configure a corresponding protocol family. We did that. We configured family INET and then put an address on it. So specify a DLCI number or VLAN identifier. Did that as well right here, unit 1. So we specified 1 for the VLAN identifier. We didn't set up a DLCI number, but that's because we got a VLAN identifier. And now select a interface encapsulation type. So we did that as well. We're going with Ethernet. So all those are good. That's for the DLC itself, but we want to know how to map it to the physical interface, which was mentioned up here. So we don't know how to make it corresponding. So hopefully there'll be some information in here about how to do that. And this is for 6. There's going to be, I'm sure, its own section. In this example, you create the FE113 physical interface on the main router. Oh, perfect. Okay, so I'll just skip down to that. That's interesting. It's interesting that well, let me just read this. You can add values for properties that you need to configure on the physical interface, such as physical encapsulation, VLAN tagging, enabling, and link speed. This example then shows how to assign logical interfaces to a logical system. Perfect. Once you do this, the logical interfaces are considered part of the logical system. Any logical interface unit can only be assigned to one system, including the main router. For example, if you configure logical unit 3 in the main router, you cannot configure logical unit 3 in a logical system. In this example, you create logical unit 0 on the logical system LS1. You can also add values for properties that you need to configure on the logical interface, such as logical interface encapsulation, VLAN ID number, call family. Okay, so we're going to need to, oh, it looks like it just adds a description, and then it just configures an IP address on there. I'm kind of curious. Okay, and then here's the, connecting a logical into a physical router. So, okay. So, it says to add it to the logical system. So this would be logical systems A, and then just an IP address on it. I'm sure the descriptions are just optional. I mean, hopefully if they're not, it will say to configure an interface in a logical system as the master administrator, configure the physical interface on the main router. Okay. All right, so I mean, descriptions are always good. I'll certainly add one. I think I already have one. Yep, I've already got a, well, I actually don't have a description on the physical, so I'll put that on there. Oops. So that's going to be a dash. This will be a, well, let's just give it the same description with a dash. All right, and now create the logical system interface on the logical unit. Okay. Huh. Okay, I guess I'm not sure which IP address they want, but I'll just set up just a regular old something from the class A. I'll just go 0001. So I'm going to go edit logical systems A interface 00.0 set family inet address 10.0.0.1/30. Okay, and then I'll do that on the other side. And if that works, then I think this will be good to go. If it doesn't, I'm not sure if logical systems, let's see, are logical systems on the JNCIE-SP. I don't remember them being in the curriculum. So looks like here's a Reddit where they're talking about logical systems. So, okay. Oh, that's interesting. Okay, so a logical system would be really good for if you're in the lab and you don't have, let's say all you've got is your laptop, you don't have a nice server like I do. Well, you can create logical systems and you can essentially have multiple, up to 16 different routers just running off of your own router. So you can kind of use one single MX as its own VM to run more instances of an MX. So that's kind of neat. And I'm sure you can do that with just 4 gigs of RAM instead of 4 gigs of RAM per each of these 16 instances that you would need if you set up 16 different MX images. So you can save yourself resources. Unfortunately, you just might have to spend more time figuring out how to get comfortable using logical systems, but that's good to know. So let's go over to router B and let's set up that same sort of configuration, and hopefully that neighborship will come up between A and B, the BGP neighborship. So I'll do a show system rollback compare 1.0, and I'll do actually a 2.0 because I thought I put the description on there as well. Yep, so I did. So this is going to be 0, my same convention I'm going to use. Set description to A, and then within the logical system, which is going to be B on this one, I will add the .2 address. All right, so with any luck, that BGP neighborship will now come up. Oh, BGP is not running. Oh, I probably need to specify which logical system I want to see a BGP summary in. Yep, so good old question mark, just right there, logical system. So I can just look at all of them. Looks like it's inactive if I do that, but let me just narrow it down to A. And you can do a pipe refresh. So this is really nice because, as I said, if you don't have the capacity to run a server like I am, and all you've got is a laptop with hopefully 8 gigs of RAM, but you might even be able to do it with like 4, you could just spin up one VMX in GNS3, and then you can make logical systems and name them R1, R2, and then whenever you want to look at a show run or a show configuration in Juniper terms, you just say show configuration, logical systems, R1, and then you see your configuration for each of that. And then you set up your routing, you set up everything as if you were using multiple devices, but you're just using that one device essentially as a VM to host those other ones as logical systems. So that's really nice. That's another really cool feature that Juniper has, especially for learners. So let's see here. Yeah, unfortunately, oh, logical system. Oh, logical systems A. So there we go, pipe refresh 1. So yeah, I mean, the purpose of this lab is not so much to learn about logical systems, it's more to learn about BFD for BGP. I'm not sure that I'll be seeing logical systems in the actual lab for JNCIE-SP, and I don't think logical systems are on the curriculum at all. I can double check that just going in and expanding out everything. So just expand all of these menus and then see if logical or systems or anything like that shows up. But I would be really surprised if they did. Logical or systems. Yeah, there's nothing on the curriculum about, oh, it looks like it all happened to not be expanded anymore again. So I'm just going to go and make sure that doesn't happen again just by, oh, it looks like it actually, I can't open them all up. But that is, I guess I can just look them over, just open them one by one and do logical or systems. Yeah, don't see anything like that. Yeah, I don't see any logical systems here. And, you know, I have been really closely following this. I have it all set up in my drive. So there were logical systems here. I'm sure I would be aware of that. Not sure what category it would be under. Probably the, let's see here. I was guessing like maybe the VPNs category, maybe the, there's another category, device infrastructure maybe, like virtual infrastructure, logical systems, something like that. But yeah, logical systems aren't going to be on it. So I'm just going to go back to the documentation, and I believe I'm going to just erase everything that was part of a logical system and then use the physical ports instead of the logical tunnels. So show configuration, pipe display set, pipe no more. And I should be able to do this pretty quickly using Notepad++. So I can just go here and then go into Notepad++ like this, paste it in, and then do Alt-Shift. There we go. And now I've got my new commands. And now I can do Control F and go to replace and replace this with GE000. Replace all, but now I'm not going to need the encapsulation and I'm not going to need the peer unit because it's no longer a logical tunnel within a logical unit. Sorry, within a logical system. So it's no longer a logical tunnel within a logical system. It is now a physical interface. Another thing you might notice is I'm really making an effort to get that language right. You might be like, oh, well, I know what you mean. What does it matter if you call it a logical system or a logical interface or a logical instance? But for me, I know that if I don't use the right language, it just means I don't know what I'm talking about. It's, of course, okay to make mistakes, to accidentally use a wrong word, or whatever, but if you're not constantly making an effort to use the correct language, in my belief, you really can very easily stray and kind of think you have an understanding of what you're trying to say, but it turns out you just don't understand it at all. You don't even know what the appropriate words are to use. Just you've completely abandoned all understanding of the concept you're working on. And I think the first step to really understanding an issue is to be able to use the language associated with the issue, or just know it. And yes, it's going to be jargon, so it's really not going to make any sense. But I think kind of the learning process, a big important part of it, is to be able to take that jargon, understand it, know it, and then eventually, as you get better and better and better, you're able to unpack that and you're able to say what that jargon means in terms that are easy to understand. And how you start with that is not by using those terms that are easy to understand and just ignoring that jargon and throwing it out the window. You start by having that jargon be the thing that you get used to saying and using, and then after a while it's like, oh, okay, now I'm more comfortable with this language, I'm more comfortable with this new concept, so I can kind of unpack it and say more of what it is, the essence of what it is. But I think you kind of do yourself a disservice if you jump right to that and try to unpack it before you even looked at it for what it is. Like if you don't get the language right, you don't use the language, you're not concerned about what it's actually called or how it's presented to you, I think you can easily kind of think you're understanding something, but really be kind of missing the boat and be kind of on the path to something that's really not really aligned with what you intended to learn or understand. So that's just kind of my rant for that, and kind of the explanation why I was so kind of I thought it was so important to call it an actual logical system and not like a logical instance or something like that, just because that's how it's presented here in the command line. So if I call it a logical system and I don't remember what the so let's, and this too, let's say I'm calling it a logical instance, which is basically the same thing as a logical system. Now I come back on the command line during the test and I'm like, oh no, those logical things, they're on the exam. What was that? They're logical what? Logical instances. So logical oh, but there's no valid completion. So, if I'm using the right language the whole time, I know right away it's a logical system. And not only that, I got to be in config mode, of course, for that. But not only that, system, I think, is a better word than instance, because systems have administrators and stuff. And we know that these logical systems have like administrators and stuff that you would consider it an instance to have, or sorry, a system to have, but you wouldn't necessarily think an instance would have that. Like the instance of a routing table. So when you create a routing instance and you have multiple routing tables, custom routing tables in a Juniper, you don't have an admin account for each routing table, but you have that for a logical system. So that's another reason why it's really important, I think, to use language correctly, to kind of latch on to terms that you hear and to kind of learn the terms as they are presented to you and not jumble them up and say, you know, this is a logical instance instead of a logical system, and kind of not correct. Oh, sorry, someone's at my door, but it's just my food order, so they just leave it at the door and I come and get it later, but it caused me to jump. But anyways, that's one of the reasons I think it's important to be really focused on using accurate language when it comes to learning something, especially for the first time. When you're teaching something, yeah, you want to make analogies, you want to use the language that makes sense. When you're trying to understand something, yeah, you're going to want to unpack the language, but it's definitely not something that you can just not give its due credence. It's important to be using the right terms. So that was far too long of a rant, and I actually jumped and I'm sweating a little bit now in the middle of that. So I'm going to be, okay, I remember. So I'm going to be taking this here, and then I'm going to be pasting that in. So it looks like I've got, oh, I replaced it with 000, so it's actually got to be 001. Okay, and now I can delete all that logical instance, logical system configuration. Okay, so everything's back to normal there. We've got description left over, so I'm going to commit this, and then I'll put in the commands here without the logical systems. Oops, and you know, as I mentioned in a previous video, it's kind of ironic that Juniper often has problems with pasting in large amounts of config at the same time, but Cisco usually doesn't, because on a Cisco, it goes right into the running config and you can have really serious problems, but on a Juniper, it's completely safe because there's a candidate config. So it's really, I think there's some irony there that you would create a system that's more safe to do certain things, but then not have those certain things be as doable as in the system where it is unsafe to do those things. All right, so I believe that's good. I think I am going to just bring my food order in. You just leave it at the door, but I don't want it to sit out there forever. So, and it looks like, okay, so only valid 0 is, perfect, okay. So I'm just gonna make sure this commits, and then I'm gonna, while that's committing, get my food order, and then I will come back and finish the other 3 routers, and then we'll go through the verification, as was the original intent of this video, just to do the verification, but unfortunately those logical systems commands weren't being accepted, or they were being accepted, but I did not know how to get the logical tunnel to map to the physical port. So I'm going to roll back this, and oh, sure enough, so I'm going to put some strategic spaces in here and take it just a few lines at a time. There we go. And I'll start from scratch. Perfect. Next one. Now put this on the other side. Excellent. All right, next one. All right, 2 more. One more. Okay, so I'm gonna bring my boot order in while this is committing, and hopefully it will be successful. All right, and that's something I could probably do. I'll in the description of this video if anyone's, I mean, no one's really, this isn't exactly intended for an audience. It's just kind of motivation for me to keep studying for this exam, which is kind of a job in itself. But the food order was SnapKitchen. It's a deliver to your door service I signed up for before all this virus stuff, just to try to lose a little bit of weight. I only need to lose like 10, 15 pounds. And the food's great. They missed one order, but that was because they were redoing all of their delivery policies, and it was just delivered the next day. So really they didn't miss any orders. So it's been good. It's expensive as hell, but if you're watching this video, hopefully you've got a job interview coming up next week, and for a network engineering position, and watching this video, you're going to blow it out of the water and get a nice big paycheck. So yeah, I'll dig up that referral link and put it in the description, and then I'll get a advantage, and yeah. So let's see here. I'm going to, okay. So yep, now I need to go over to router B and do the same thing I did on router A. So just a reminder, this is Alt-Shift. And I'll need a description on the other interface as well. Oops. All right. Oops, and nope, everything is good to go, except I'm going to need to know, okay, so the description's right there, so I'm going to need to change the logical tunnel interfaces to be the interface, the physical interfaces. All right, so I think that's everything. The logical units, I actually, oh, right. So these are for logical tunnels, the peer unit and the encapsulation, but we're not going to need that now that they're physical, and we won't need to specify a different VLAN since it's physical as well. It can be unit 0. So of course all this is going to need to change, and then any ports here. So all right, there we go. Oops, and I'm gonna have to put some advantageous spaces here as well. Hopefully I only need, well, let's go with 4. So I'm not gonna do a rollback 0 because I don't want to roll back the description that I put on there. And it's just not necessary, it'll just overwrite it. As long as there's no changes, be good. Then of course we can do a quick check and make sure the BGP connection to router A comes up after this commit. So still inactive, but the commit, so the commit's gone through, but it's still inactive, which kind of would expect it to be going into established just on that one side. Huh, okay, well, so I believe this is 6.4, could be 40.4. Yep, 6.4 is the local address. Let's see if the port is up. Let's see if I can, perfect. So you can see the issue is that I've still got that old address on this port. So if I look show 000, you can see if you're new to the Juno port world, I'm coming from a Cisco background. I studied at a Cisco Networking Academy, and I got my CCNP actually before I got any Juniper certs at all. So I think, yeah, I think that's true. No, that's definitely true. I got my CCNP and then my JNCIE. So this is new to anyone who's from Cisco land, having 2 IP addresses on a port, unless of course you have a secondary, but even then you couldn't have one in the same subnet, which is not what's going on here, but that's something that can happen in a Juniper that cannot happen on a Cisco. So let's go ahead and take that out. And I believe we'll need to do that on the other side as well. Oh, there we go. It went into established right away. So there won't need to be anything like that on this side, but might as well just check anyways. Okay. So somehow it decided to use, well, maybe because these were listed second, it was able to form a connection here, so it wasn't using these, but now that there's only one listed on this side, show configuration ints, it somehow knew to use this 10.10.10/30 address, network address, instead of the 10.0.0/30 network address, because there's only one possible set of addresses that will work, when before there were 2 possible sets, and the one, it probably went with the one listed first, and then of course that one doesn't have any, let's see here, show configuration display set. Well, I mean, when it comes to redistributing when it comes to BGP, it's just enabled for the interface. So I guess I am pretty surprised that it wouldn't have been able to have an established BGP session, even though there was more than one IP address configured on each port. And even though the IP address that it was likely using was the one not used in the lab, I would still think, even with those being the case, it would still be able to form that BGP neighborship over that other subnet, because your, let's see here. Yeah, because you're exporting send direct. I mean, but live and learn, really. I guess that's something to kind of keep in mind for the exam if there's an issue with, I mean, that's just kind of one of those reflex things. Just check the IP, make sure it's got a valid host address and the subnet it's intended to have. But on a Juniper, make sure that it's the only one configured. So show configuration interfaces. Perfect. And looks like there's no issues like that with the other port, only on that one. So I show BGP summary. It's in established. So let's take a look at this side and see if we can fix the config here. So this is going to be the port to the, so it's going to be 0000. All right. One thing you might notice too is that I took the order in from the door and I'm touching my face. You know, I'm doing everything I can. I'm social distancing and stuff. There comes a point where, like, you know, how paranoid do you need to be? I'm healthy. I'm social distancing. Like, I don't think just as soon as I grab the order or touch the same handle that the delivery person made, you know, just going, running and washing my hands. Do I need to do that? Maybe I do, maybe I don't. But I want to finish this video, probably just wash my hands after the video, try not to touch my face. But there's definitely a point where it's just kind of too much. Like if I were out all day at the store or something and I came home, or even just like an hour, half an hour, 20 minutes at the store shopping for something, came home, yeah, I want to wash my hands, but just grabbing the same handle as the delivery person, I don't know, it doesn't bother me. All right, so let's see here and go ahead and, okay. That's just another example, though, of how difficult it is to really keep your mind focused and engaged on an exam like this, especially in extreme circumstances like this, where your mind really kind of runs amok. It's just hard to stay focused and do the things you need to do to pass a test like this. And sometimes it just seems like, you know, why am I even bothering? But I guess my advice for that is kind of be prepared for that. Like you'll get those thoughts, you know, why am I even doing this? And I think good advice is try to come up with rebuttals or reasons for that before you're in that mind state. So if you're in a mindset where it's like, yes, I really want to get this test, this is really important, this is going to help boost my career, it's going to make me more widely marketable in my industry, it's going to increase my job effectiveness, it's going to just immediately allow me to take advantage of things at work that I couldn't take advantage of without it. I've got 4 solid reasons. And if I ever get into that mindset of, why am I doing this? This is too much work. There's other things I could be doing. Now you've got those 4 things, and you can go back and you can even write them down in a journal or on your Google Drive or something, and just name the file, why am I doing this, underscore JNCIE-SP or JNCIE or whatever test you're working on, the CCNA. And if you find you're hating your studying, just go look up those reasons again and just be like, okay, well, it makes sense why I'm doing this. Yeah, it sucks. It's hard work, but I get all of these things if I do it. And at that point, I really wanted those things. And, I kind of still want those things. Like, it's hard, but I think there are good reasons to do it. And if you don't have those kind of things ready for you to think about when you get into that mind state, you can easily get discouraged and give up and get frustrated. So that's, I think, good advice is to kind of have those questions about, like, why am I doing this? This is so much work. Have them worked out before you get into the mindset where your answers are really going to make a difference in how you, whether or not you actually proceed with the exam. You want to have those kinds of questions prepared in advance to help you when you start to kind of waver and falter, instead of having them pop up and be used as something to derail you away because you haven't really thought about those the way you needed to in advance. So before you take on any big test or anything, really have a strong understanding of why you're doing it. And because otherwise, once it starts getting really hard and you realize how much work it's going to take, you might kind of reevaluate whether or not you want to do it. And if that's the first time you're doing that, you're probably not going to have very good answers prepared and ready for you. All right, so commit and quit. It's kind of a lot of just random rants in this video. Kind of like to keep them more focused than this, but things are crazy with the virus and stuff. And this is probably, looking back historically, this is probably going to be one of the bigger weeks on April 8th, or at least the start of some of the bigger weeks. So, but as long as I'm healthy and as long as this lab works, everything is good. All right, so let's do the verification steps now that this is good to go. Oops, and this is just the extra stuff I Googled to try to figure out how to use a logical system and how to map a logical tunnel to a physical interface, which unfortunately I was not able to figure out. So let's just go ahead and skip all of that, logical systems, and just use the default system. All right, so here's the verification command for host A. Perfect, so now Everything's good. BFD is enabled. I'm going to have, of course, a different path to the trace file. They've got a special directory set up for their logical system, it looks like. And then looks like the commands just, oh, they've got this twice. So this might be another instance where they're just editing a template. They accidentally put that in twice or something. But let's read the meaning. The output shows that logical system A, oh, maybe because it's in a logical system, has two neighbors with BFD enabled. When BFD is not enabled, the output displays BFD disabled, down, and the BFD enabled option is absent. If BFD is enabled and the system and the session is down, the output displays BFD enabled down. The output also shows that BFD related events are being written to a log file because trace operations are configured. All right, so let's verify that the BFD session is up. Show BFD session extensive. So, yep, it's been up for about 13 minutes. Everything looks good. Looks like I've only got one BFD session though. So I'm wondering why they've got one to both 6.4 and 40.4, but I've only got one to 6.4. So is it because, yep, it's because my BGP neighborship to 40.4 is still inactive. So let's see what the issue is with that. Let's just see if I can ping 40.4. Oh, and I've got, I typed in 8 instead of a 9. But even so, I've got no route to host. So let's see if the BGP neighbors are up here. Show BGP summary. Oh, and looks like the directly connected neighbor to 40.4 is down. So of course it's not going to go from A to C if the one from A to B is down. Okay. Well, let's see if OSPF is up. So, oh, okay. Well, here's the problem. So OSPF is only enabled. There's only a OSPF neighborship to this port, but to A, but not to C. So let's take a look at C. And it looks like, well, here's going to be an issue. So this LO3 is the wrong logical unit for that. It's going to be .0. All right. So let's see here. So we've got 10.10.10.6 on there. Oh, you know what? That actually might be it because we're not. Oh, actually, it wouldn't explain why there's not a OSPF neighbor though. I mean, it would explain why there's not a BGP neighborship because the IGP is not sending the IP that is being used for the local address for the BGP group because the IGP was having a logical unit on this loopback interface advertised that actually was not configured. Logical unit 0 was configured, not 3. So that's not going to change the OSPF neighbor being down. So we're going to need to troubleshoot that. So we've got 10.10.10.5. So we know that the other side has got to be .6 because a /30 has 4 addresses in them, one being the network address, one being the broadcast, and then it's only got 2 host addresses. So we know it can only have .6. So let's make sure that's what's on there. Yep, so that looks good. Let's make sure they can ping. And they can't ping, which is interesting because they're directly connected. So it could just be that they're wired up a way I didn't expect. So it looks like C is going to be port 0 and B is going to be port 1. So C, yep, port 0. B, yep, port 1. So that looks right. All right, so show int terse pipe match GE dash. Show int terse pipe match GE dash. Oh, so here's an issue, of course. Let's do a show chassis FPC 0. Okay, so I mean, that's obviously going to be a problem if it doesn't even recognize the command to look for the FPC. You can see here it shows up as online, but here, yeah, it's not even recognizing it. So I'm betting that the problem is that, nope, so the link is actually wired up. You can see that it is connected. The control plane and the forwarding plane are wired together. So, but there does seem to be some sort of issue with the forwarding plane. So I think I'm going to probably end the video here. And next video will be more verification, just kind of going back through these. And then BFD authentication after that. But for now, since it's going to require a reboot and that takes some time, I think I'll just end the video on the reboot. So thanks for watching. I'll see if I can get that referral code down in the comments so you can sign up for a delivery service, help out a delivery driver. I think that's a pretty safe job to have now in the pandemic, especially if you got like some personal protective gear. I mean, all you're doing is knocking on someone's door, leaving their order and going. So you're not even really going out in the public. You're just in your car. And then, of course, you got to go into the store and pick up the thing you're delivering. But it's probably a pretty safe job to have. So supporting that industry, I think, is going to be a good thing. There's no reason for any industry that doesn't have to take a hit to take a hit. And I think delivery is probably one of those industries. So I'm gonna restart this. Oh, okay, well, there we go. So yeah, it takes, one thing you'll see too, you saw down there, it said KVM acceleration can be used. Sometimes when you're setting up the GNS3 VPM, you won't see that. It'll say that it can't be used. So you'll need to just Google and figure out how to explicitly enable that. I actually had to do that, but that's not the topic of this video. For now, I'm just going to reboot the VM so that it comes back and hopefully those issues with the forwarding plane will be resolved in that next video. But until then, thanks for watching, and I hope you come back and enjoy the great content to come. All right, stay safe, everyone.